It started with a phone call on a rainy Tuesday night. I remember the way the droplets slid down the window pane as I sat curled on the couch, the static on the line mirroring the tremble in my brother's voice. "I need your help," he said. And something about the way he said it, quiet, uncertain, like a man who'd rehearsed the words 100 times but still didn't quite believe he was saying them, made me straighten up immediately. He'd always been the ambitious one, the dreamer with the big ideas and even bigger promises. I'd been the steady one, the list maker, the practical sibling who paid bills on time and made sure everyone got home safe after parties. But when he told me about the business he wanted to start, a boutique digital marketing agency, sleek and modern, for brands that want to matter, as he put it, I listened. And then I believed. I didn't have much, but I gave him what I could. I took a loan in my name, one that would quietly trail behind me like a shadow for years to come. I emptied my savings account, the one I'd been building slowly, month by month, for a future I still hadn't quite defined. I worked weekends for extra cash, cutting out dinners, new clothes, any indulgence that didn't directly serve his dream. I didn't complain, not once. He was my brother, and I loved him. In the beginning, he was grateful. He called me every night with updates, his voice buzzing with excitement and caffeine. He asked for advice, listened intently, and even told people I was the backbone of the business. I remember the first time he sent me a picture of the office. Nothing more than a 2-room loft with mismatched furniture and a coffee machine that broke every other day. But to us, it was the start of something extraordinary. I felt proud. Proud of him. Proud of us. But slowly, things began to shift. The calls came less frequently, and when they did, they were short, distracted. He was busy. Meetings, clients, deadlines. I understood. I told myself not to take it personally. He was building something. That kind of thing demanded time, focus, sacrifice. Then came the silence. Weeks would go by without a single word. I'd text, casual things like, "Hey, just checking in," or "Saw this article, thought of you," and get no response. I started to worry. Was something wrong? Was he okay? I left voicemails, each one a little more desperate than the last, until I started to feel pathetic. Eventually, I stopped calling. The worst part wasn't the money, or the fear that I might never see it again. It wasn't the way I had to cut corners in my own life to cover the payments, or the way I avoided telling our parents, not wanting to burden them with worry. The worst part was the betrayal, the silence, the way he disappeared from my life like I had never mattered at all. I heard through mutual friends that the business was doing well. He'd hired more people, moved into a bigger office, landed a few big-name clients. His Instagram was filled with glossy photos, smiling staff, catered lunches, sleek conference rooms with exposed brick and warm lighting. He looked happy. He looked like a man who had everything under control. And not once did he mention me. I tried to be rational. People change. Success changes people. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he thought I wanted more than he could give. But the truth pressed against my ribs like a weight. I had been there when no one else was. I had believed in him before the world did. I had risked everything, and he didn't even have the decency to say thank you or goodbye. One evening, I sat at the edge of my bed, phone in hand, thumb hovering over his name and my contacts. My heart raced. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him why. Why he cut me out. Why he pretended I didn't exist. I didn't call. I couldn't bear the sound of it ringing and ringing and ringing, only to land in voicemail again. That night, I dreamed about us as kids. We were in the backyard, barefoot and wild, chasing fireflies as the sun dipped below the fence line. He turned to me and grinned, a smear of dirt on his cheek, and said, "We'll always stick together, right?" I'd nodded, full of blind trust. Even in sleep, the memory made me ache. When I woke up, there was still no message, no missed call, just the sound of rain outside my window and the quiet hum of a world where my brother no longer saw me. The silence between us hardened into something brittle and painful, something I carried around like a secret injury no one else could see. I stopped telling people about the business, about my role in its beginning. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their advice. What could anyone say that would make it better? That maybe he was too busy? That he'd come around? That I should just move on? None of it helped. None of it reached the part of me that was still waiting, foolishly, for my brother to remember I existed. Months passed. Seasons changed. I got a promotion at work, something I might have once celebrated with him over drinks and laughter. But the moment felt hollow without anyone to share it with. I sat alone at a bar that night, swirling my whiskey and imagining what it would have been. Like if he were there beside me. He would have raised his glass, told me he always knew I'd get there, punched my shoulder the way he used to when we were kids. I hated how clearly I could still hear his voice in my head. My mother started asking about him more often. She didn't know the details, only that we hadn't seen each other in a while. I lied, softly, said he was just swamped, said I was busy too. It was easier than trying to explain the sharp edges of abandonment. How do you tell your own mother that one of her children ghosted the other like a stranger on the street? Then came the article. It showed up in my email, forwarded by a friend who had no idea about the rift between us. "Thought you'd be proud," the message read. Attached was a glossy magazine profile, a glowing piece on young innovators, shaping the future of digital branding. There he was on the cover, confident in a navy blazer, sitting in that new office I'd never been invited to. The interview painted him as self-made, a visionary who started from scratch with nothing but a laptop and an idea. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Nothing but a laptop and an idea? What about the nights he cried to me over the phone? What about the loan I took out? The sleepless nights? The sacrifices I made without hesitation? I wasn't expecting a public thank you. I wasn't looking for applause. But to be erased entirely, to be rewritten out of his story like I never existed, was a pain I hadn't prepared for. I wanted to scream, to march into his office and demand answers, to look him in the eye and make him explain how he could toss me aside like an old coat. But I didn't. Instead, I closed the article. I sat with the heaviness in my chest, the ache that had become all too familiar. I wondered if he even remembered those early days, the chaos, the hope, the fragile bond that once felt unbreakable. Then came the wedding invitation, not his, but our cousin's, a small family-only ceremony in the mountains. He would be there. The thought made my stomach churn. I hadn't seen him in nearly 2 years by that point. I didn't know how I'd feel standing in the same room with him again, if I'd crumble or explode or pretend I didn't see him. I RSVP'd yes anyway. I needed to know. I needed to see him with my own eyes, to prove to myself that he was real, that everything that happened wasn't just some strange dream I hadn't woken from. The cabin was warm with twinkle lights and the smell of pine. Laughter filled the air. I hugged relatives I hadn't seen in ages, smiled through questions about my job, my love life, my plans, but my eyes kept scanning the room, waiting. And then he walked in. He looked the same. Older, maybe. Sharper, around the edges. His hair was shorter, his suit crisp and expensive. But it was him. My brother. The boy I used to build pillow forts with. The teenager I stayed up all night comforting when his heart got broken. The man I'd given everything to. His eyes caught mine for a second. Just a second. He blinked, froze, then looked away. I waited for him to come over. I waited through the ceremony, through dinner, through dessert. He didn't come. He stayed on the other side of the room, laughing with cousins, hugging aunts, dodging me like I was a ghost he didn't believe in. And still, I waited. My hands fidgeted under the table, my heart thudding like a drum in my chest. It wasn't until the dancing started that I finally moved. I walked out onto the porch, cold air wrapping around me like a question I couldn't answer. I leaned against the railing, staring out at the dark forest. The door creaked behind me. My heart leapt. But it wasn't him. Just another guest slipping out for air. He never came. Not that night, not since, not ever. And I realized then, with an ache that settled deep in my bones, that I had been holding on to a version of him that no longer existed. Maybe never had. The weeks after the wedding passed in a haze of numbness I couldn't shake. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I didn't even talk about it. Not to friends, not to anyone. I just carried it, like a stone lodged beneath my ribs, silent and sharp. I went through my days on autopilot, going to work, answering emails, cooking dinner. But something fundamental inside me had shifted. It was as if a part of me had quietly died out there on that porch in the cold, waiting for someone who had already decided not to come. I stopped checking his social media. I muted his posts. It wasn't out of spite, it was out of self-preservation. I couldn't keep looking at his perfectly curated life, the one I had helped build, while mine felt increasingly hollow. I didn't want to see the smiling selfies, the client praise, the vacations. I didn't want to keep wondering if he ever thought about me when he looked at the office door or the framed first contract I helped him land. It hurt too much to ask questions that would never have answers. But still, I caught myself thinking about him. In the grocery store, when I saw his favorite brand of cereal. At the gas station, where we used to get late-night snacks after long drives. On Sunday mornings, when I passed the coffee shop where we used to meet and talk about everything. Life, love, dreams, the future. I would see a man in a gray hoodie with a familiar walk, and for half a second my heart would leap, only to sink again when he turned and it wasn't him. Sometimes I'd draft messages. Not angry ones, not bitter, just small, sad offerings. Hey, I hope you're okay. Or, I miss you. But I never sent them. I couldn't face the silence again. I couldn't go back to staring at 3 dots that never turned into a reply. It felt like reopening a wound that never quite healed, slicing it open again just to bleed into the void. I tried to tell myself it was over, that I had done everything I could, that I had nothing to feel guilty for. But guilt is a strange thing. It doesn't always care about logic. It creeps in during quiet moments, whispering maybe you should have done more, maybe he needed space, maybe you just misunderstood. Would push those thoughts away, only to have them return at night when the world was silent, and all I had were memories. My friends tried to help. One of them, Clara, finally cornered me over dinner one night. "You never talk about him," she said, eyes searching mine. "But I know you're still hurting." I looked down at my plate, the food untouched, and I said quietly, "I don't know how to talk about someone who stopped being real to me." She reached across the table and held my hand. "You loved him. That doesn't just go away." And I had. I loved him with the kind of love that builds bridges, that moves mountains, that sacrifices without expecting anything in return. I loved him in a way that had always felt safe, until it didn't. I had never thought he would weaponize my loyalty, my belief in him, my trust. But he had, not with cruelty or malice, but with indifference. And sometimes, indifference is more violent than hate. There was one night, a stormy one, thick with thunder and flickering lightning, when I opened the drawer where I kept the loan documents. I sat on the floor with them spread out around me, every page a reminder of how deeply I had believed in him. I ran my fingers over my signature, the ink slightly smudged, and for the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not out of anger, but from grief, for the brother I had lost, for the version of myself who had once been full of hope and faith. The next morning, I boxed up everything. The papers, the old photos, the startup logo I had helped design, printed on a worn-out t-shirt he once gifted me. I sealed the box and put it in the back of my closet, not to forget, but to stop living in the ache of what once was. I needed to start imagining a life that didn't orbit around someone who had chosen to leave me behind. I started writing again. Little things, journal entries, fragments of poetry, letters I'd never send. I poured my hurt into words because they were the only place I still had control. I started saying yes to things I used to avoid: weekend trips, blind dates, concerts. At first, everything felt like a performance, like I was pretending to move on. But slowly, the pretending began to feel real. And then, one quiet Sunday afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a name I hadn't seen in almost a year. Liam. My breath caught. My heart raced. For a moment, all the noise in the world faded. I stared at the screen, hands trembling, time stretching out unbearably. He had texted me 3 words. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. I just stared at those words, over and over again, as 1,000 memories surged back into my mind. The beginning, the rise, the betrayal, the silence. And in that moment, I didn't know what hurt more: that he had finally remembered me, or that he had waited this long. I didn't answer his message that day. I told myself I needed time to think. But really, I was afraid. Afraid that this could be the start of healing, or another wound I'd never recover from. I left the message unread, as if preserving its untouched state gave me some semblance of control. As if not opening it meant I still had the power to choose whether or not to let the storm back in. For 3 days, I carried my phone with the attentiveness of someone holding a ticking bomb. I'd glance at it every few minutes, half hoping, half dreading a follow-up. There was none, just those 3 words. Static and silent, like a hand extended in the dark with no way to see if it was clenched in regret or just an empty gesture of guilt. On the 4th day, I opened it. Then I typed a reply. "What do you want to talk about?" It was colder than I felt, but it was all I could manage. I waited, the cursor blinking like a pulse in my chest. He replied within minutes. "I'm sorry." I stared at those 2 words for a long time. My heart didn't leap. There was no sense of victory or vindication, just exhaustion. Like someone who's walked too long through a blizzard, only to finally see the edge of the forest and feel too tired to run toward it. I didn't respond. I needed more than an apology. I needed an explanation. I needed him to dig through the rubble of what he'd destroyed and name it all. A few hours later, he asked to meet. He suggested a cafe downtown, quiet and familiar. One we used to go to when the business was still an idea scribbled on napkins. The kind of place where the barista knew our names and our orders. It felt too poetic, almost cruel. But I agreed. Part of me needed to see him, not the polished version, in articles or filtered photos, but the man underneath all the noise. I arrived early. My hands were cold, my stomach twisted into knots. The sound of the espresso machine and the low hum of conversations around me barely registered. I chose the corner booth, the one where we once sat for hours planning his pitch deck. He walked in 10 minutes late. His hair was longer than at the wedding. His eyes tired, weighed down with something I couldn't name. He spotted me and paused, just for a second. Then walked over slowly, like someone approaching an old wound, unsure if it still stung. "Hi," he said. I nodded. I couldn't speak yet. He sat down. His hands fidgeted on the table. "Thank you for coming." I waited. He looked down. "I owe you everything." I didn't flinch. I didn't reassure him. I let the silence stretch between us like a bridge he had to choose whether or not to cross. He swallowed hard. I was scared. When things started going well, I didn't know how to deal with it. I kept thinking about how much I owed you, how much I didn't deserve it, and instead of facing it, I pushed it away. I pushed you away. I stayed quiet, letting him unravel. I told myself I'd pay you back once the business stabilized, that once I was on my feet, I'd come back and make it right. But the longer I waited, the harder it got. And then, I didn't know how to face you. So I didn't. He looked at me then. Really looked. I was a coward. A part of me wanted to scream at him, to ask why he waited until everything was broken, to make him understand what it felt like to be discarded by someone. You would have walked through fire for... But another part of me, a tired, aching part, just wanted peace. Do you think that's enough? I asked. Saying sorry? He shook his head. No, it's not. I know it's not. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm not proud of what I did. I think about it all the time. And if I could go back, but you can't, I cut in. He nodded. I know. We sat in silence. The air between us, heavy, complicated. I don't know what you want from me now, I said honestly. To forgive you? To be your sister? Again? To pretend like the last 2 years didn't happen? I don't expect anything, he said softly. I miss you. It was such a simple sentence, and so devastating, because I missed him too, even now, even after everything. Grief doesn't cancel out love. It just knots it up, hides it in dark corners, wraps it in barbed wire. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, I whispered. He nodded, eyes glistening. I'll earn it, or at least try. We talked for hours after that, not about the past, not too much, but about small things. Our parents, childhood memories, the bar near our old apartment, the way we used to fight over the TV remote. It was halting, cautious, like strangers trying to remember the rhythm of a language they used to speak fluently. When I left the cafe, he hugged me. Not tightly, not possessively, just gently, like someone finally learning how to hold something without breaking it. In the weeks that followed, he texted now and then. Never too much, just enough to let me know he was there. He started repaying the loan in monthly installments. I didn't ask him to, but he did, quietly, without fanfare. I still don't know if we'll ever be what we once were, but I know this. I stopped waiting by the phone. I stopped living in the past. I let myself mourn, and then I let myself breathe again. And in that space, something new began to grow. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Maybe some relationships don't return to what they were. Maybe they become something else, something quieter, slower, more deliberate. And maybe that's okay. Maybe love, even when broken, still leaves enough behind to build something worth holding on to, even if you build it differently this time, even if it takes everything in you not to walk away again. I helped my brother start his business. He lost me along the way, but maybe, just maybe, he's learning how to find me again.